Welcome back to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price. You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
It's the best of the best. It's the one and only DJ Ice, Louisville's coldest DJ.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Hey, good evening. Welcome to Conscious Fever here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. I am Carl Price, your host tonight. Welcome to this week's show. We've got an interesting topic tonight. Of course, I'm here on the other side of this break. You're going to see Paul Mullins, and we're going to talk about this. Yes. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about tonight, live, if you're interested. Open mic night. Open mic night. What that means is that you can call in at 502-410-5710, and you catch us here live. If you don't want to comment below, you can actually call in live. Again, the number is 502-410-5710. Are men treated unfairly in the court system? We have a website. We have a website that we're going to be talking about. Okay, we have a website that we're going to be talking. We're going to get some comments from. One of the topics is: do you think men are treated unfairly within the family court system? And I think we're talking about the whole court system in general tonight. We've got a whole hour to talk about this. Again, 502-410-5710 if you want to call in live as opposed to comment, or you can comment live if you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, Conscious Fever page, or Facebook, Carl Price's personal page, and all the other social medias. I think TikTok, Instagram, etc., etc. I do want to remind you again, I can't really just hold this completely up. The show is Show Us Your Derby Flair. That's the title of the show. The show is the annual Pre-Derby Scholarship Fundraiser on May 2nd, 2024, live here in Louisville, Kentucky, 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. at the Dennison Grand Event Space at 4205 Cane Run Road here in Louisville in Chavley. Tickets are $100. Entertainment by DJ, and it is the Kentucky State University Alumni Association, their Derby event that they do every year. So anyway, are men treated unfairly in the court system? We're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this break, I'm going to bring Paul Mullins in, and we're going to talk about this topic. We hear this a lot, and we want you to weigh in. Again, if you want to weigh in, 502-410-5710. Don't be shy. I'm Carl Price. This is Conscious Fever here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price. You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
All right, welcome back to Conscious Fever here on ICE Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. I am Carl Price, your host. Thanks for joining us tonight, whatever it is you're doing. If you're in Louisville, you're probably in Waterfront Park or Shawnee Park or Chickasaw Park, or Cherokee Park, because it's still about 80 degrees out there. Cox Park, it's still about 80 degrees outside. So I'm sure you're probably enjoying it, thinking you're getting a whiff of summer, and you might be getting a whiff of something else. Of what? A COVID or something else. But anyway, I'm here tonight with Paul Mullins. Are men treated unfairly in the court system? Are men treated unfairly in the court system? And we're going to Mr. Mullins.
Is that you just gonna start out with the question put out there on the table?
I mean, why not? Why not? Why not
Have
just
all
put you?
the ladies call me up and cuss me out?
No, I don't think they're going to do that. I think that what they're going to do is, I mean, this is serious stuff, Paul.
It is.
This is serious stuff. Now, let me just start off, and I'll start off by saying that, many years ago when I was a prosecutor, it's been 9 years now, almost 10 years since I was the last prosecutor.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. That's a good thing, huh? Maybe not.
Welcome to the light side.
To the right side of the representation and lawyer S. But listen, when I was a prosecutor, I remember that the office I prosecuted out of had this really weird policy. I thought it was a weird policy because it really sort of skated around the truth. And the policy was that if a woman has a different story, a victim, but normally a woman, and listen, Paul, let's just talk about this. Remember the Rittenhouse trial?
Yes.
Remember the Rittenhouse trial when the judge said, you do not call any of those people who have been killed a victim. All right. There's some validity in that, right? Because if the individual that is charged, the defendant, is never convicted, is it right to even refer to the person who is claiming to be a victim to actually be a victim?
Right. I totally understand the rationale, but it's so ingrained in our judicial system that the person making the complaint is the victim. We're supposed to say alleged victim, but more to that judge's point, perhaps they shouldn't be called victims. They should be called witnesses.
Not until there is a conviction. Right. So in any case, but there was a policy in the office that basically we just didn't prosecute so-called victims. And really what the policy was, we shouldn't prosecute liars. Right. So you have a situation where an individual comes in and says, he beat me. He comes to court and says, no, I didn't beat her. I was in Dubai at the time. Brings in the sufficient proof, and she's a liar. But during the course of the case, she is surrounded, Paul, by all of these victims, advocates saying, you've been wronged and all of this. When in fact, she's a liar. Right. In the meantime, the individual that she has charged, she has basically propped up the allegations that the charges are so serious that he is placed on a bond that he can't make. So he stays in jail in Kentucky, before the PC hearing, for the probable cause hearing. It could be up to 10 days.
Or at least 24 hours. And she certainly, just the fact that you have the interaction with law enforcement, it disrupts your life. And it turns out that it's all a lie. And a lot of times, I'm a criminal defense attorney and a family court attorney. We'll get into the family court issue later, but people want something to be done. And as a defense attorney, you turn to them and say, you're free. Case is over. There's not much you can do. And that's the bad part. And it's, we're picking on whether or not men are, the topic is whether men are treated unfairly. So you got to wrap this around to the situation to where if a man goes into court and swears out a false warrant against a woman, the issue becomes...
Rarely happens, but okay.
Well, I mean, to say rarely happens is because a lot of times his case won't make it to court. If they his case won't make it to court. So you don't have a situation where that might happen. He goes down, he says the woman's doing this, doing that, and they say, oh, well, go to a different court. Go to family court.
Hold on, Paul. I'm going to challenge you on that before we get too deep into the show. It seldom happens with men for a number of
Which
reasons.
part?
Well, I mean that they come down and they lie. Now, I'm not saying that every man that has ever
No, it's
called the
not.
police. No, hold on a second. Every man that's ever called the police or ever called for help or has ever been able to take out a warrant on a woman has always told the truth. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, however, is that it is, first of all, the likelihood that he's going to be able to take out the warrant sometimes it's tough.
Right.
You know that as well as I do.
Even when he's telling 100% facts.
Even when he's telling the truth. Right. And here in Jefferson County, if she gets there first with the lie and he comes second with the truth,
They won't take it.
they won't take his warrant.
Likely won't take his petition.
Right.
My experience as a defense attorney, and this is all anecdotal, but if I say this statistic and it happens to be false,
Ooh,
so
that's
be
a
it.
big word. What does that mean? Anecdotal. I know how to spell it, but what does it mean, Paul?
I'm giving you a story to make my point.
Oh, okay. That's what it means. Okay. I know.
So
I'm wiser.
it's not statistical. In my experience, a man can be assaulted by a woman. He can call the police, and he's still got a high likelihood of going to jail. That's just that to me is a bias. Whether that's in the court system, whether it's outside the court system, I consider the police interaction still part of the court system.
But why
and-
is the system like that, Paul?
Because people, in my opinion,
I mean, I know you're trying to stay away from the fact of saying that we have 90% of the judges here in Jefferson County are women.
No, it's
But
not
and
because
I
what
would think
happens
that
on-
that's
what-
the reason. I mean,
what
I wouldn't say
happens
that
on
that's
the-
the reason.
Well, what happens on the street isn't judicial interaction. What I'm saying is that generally men are seen as, and they should be, as more physical, more aggressive, and they can do more damage than a woman. So
Generally, that's the case.
So, for instance, if I report that my wife hit me, they're gonna come looking for bruises and scars. Then they're probably not gonna see any. You know, maybe not. You know, I'm not married, but I'm just saying if I got hit, I might not have a bruise or a scar. Okay, and they're gonna look at me and say, "We're not gonna do anything. We don't see bruises and scars." But if my wife, ex-wife, called and said I hit her, they're probably gonna arrest me where they see bruises and scars anyway.
Right.
And that's the bias.
And particularly about the protocol. Why don't you tell the people about the protocol here in Jefferson County when law enforcement responds to a domestic violence complaint? Somebody has to go to jail.
That's what they say, unless the somebody who has to go to jail is a man, and they just tell them to go home, go somewhere else. That's anecdotal. I'm not saying it's 100% facts, but in my experience, I have plenty of phone calls where people say I called the police and I got arrested, and it's just I don't, you know, to me. You could say, well, people are lying and they try to call it. No, if you call the police and you're looking for protection and the police come, they have a conversation with you and they have a conversation with a person and that person pretends to be a victim and you get arrested, something's wrong with that.
Yeah.
I've got plenty of cases. I got one pending right now that I'm not going to mention names, but I can tell you I got a person who was severely stabbed, bleeding, to the point to where he passed out. He called the police. The police can't talk to him. Guess why, Carl? Guess why they can't talk to him?
Why?
Because he's passed out from bleeding. So the girl says, I was acting in self-defense.
And that flies for
And
him.
they arrested him.
And they arrested him. The
They
bleeding
arrested him.
man.
After he got out of the hospital, they arrested
The bleeding
him.
man.
Yes. It's terrible.
Yeah.
And there was blood all over the house. I mean, you know, the prosecutor, I got a good prosecutor. She's looking at it like, oh, this sounds like some crap. There's blood all over the house. The only person with a knife, the only person who stabbed anybody is the female.
It's female.
But the officers arrived, got her story. She said she was acting in self-defense, gave a good story. And then I'm looking at the report, and I'm like, I'm poking holes in her story just by the way the officer reported it. So he's got a cut. This person has a cut on his forearm and his shoulder. But she is alleging self-defense because at the time, you know, she was allegedly being punched and strangled.
Yeah, 502-410-5710.
In that case,
Y'all got to be muted.
oh, okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
In that case, she alleged that she was acting in self-defense, but mistakenly in the police report, he wrote, victim was afraid, ran to the kitchen, told defendant not to leave, ran to the kitchen, gets a knife, and comes back and stabs him. Now, if he's trying to leave, why you got to stab him? You know, it's just
doesn't make any sense.
terrible.
So let me ask this question, Paul, before we get too far into, because, I mean, you and I have a lot of examples.
A lot.
Right.
A lot more than that one.
We have a lot of examples, but let me get back to what I started off saying, and that is that, for instance, there was this policy, and I think it still exists here in Jefferson County, in the Jefferson County Attorney's Office, that a victim is classified as a victim, and if in fact she is proven to be lying, there will be no action taken against her. What's wrong with that picture?
That's part of the problem is that if I'm not a female, but if I'm a female, I kind of know
That's
in the
something
back
you
of my
would know.
mind. Listen, in the back of my mind, if I'm anywhere and I know that a system has my back, whether I'm telling the truth or not is not really the issue. The issue is for all the women who are truly abused, you're going to have some women out there who are abusing the system. And that's the problem.
Yes, and that's the problem. And that's the problem. And that's the sad reality, because there are actually women out there being abused. But then you have, look at that. It's the dust. But then you have women who are raping, if you will, for lack of a better term, the
use
system.
a better term.
Use a better term.
Use a better term.
Is raping the system, and it really makes it hard for all of the women who have who really need those those resources and those services that law enforcement offers for true victims of domestic violence. But let's talk about the court system, Paul. Let's talk about the perception. I'm just going to talk about the perception first.
No
the perception is that men feel like that they don't want to file for custody of their child, even though they know that the mother is a piece of shit and probably probably the child is at risk of abuse.
So I do a lot of custody cases, and again, I don't have any statistics.
But the guys don't do anything. Let me finish that. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm getting. That's exactly what I was going to say. I do a lot of custody cases and divorces, and a male client reacts differently.
Don't put them on.
And what his expectations are than female clients. And I hear you. So the example that I'm would say is that the average male client comes in and his expectations are that he wants his minimum rights protected. Okay, such as I just want an equal shot at getting visitation and custody of my child. Now the laws change; it's helped a lot. And we can get back to that on a different topic. But the female client will come in and, I have to explain to them that this is the law and this is what the other side might be entitled to. And that's not their expectation.
How much has this bias in the court system, because I think we've established that there's bias in the court system, right? Against men.
Do we say
Are you
that?
willing to say, I know, we didn't say it yet, but I'm about to say it now. Okay. Listen, I believe there is. How much of that bias has spilled over to services and resources that are offered in the community, such as CPS and different things like that? I mean, does a man have a shot with CPS? Since you do these types of cases.
Yes, he has a shot, but it's to say it's a fair and equal shot. No, the man.
I didn't say that.
Well, I was gonna say Just say as you said, does he have a shot? Yeah, he got a shot, but it's against a female who, in family court CPS situations, who is, as you say, not doing well, a piece of shit. So your female has to be the drug addict, there's something going on with her. Otherwise, many cases you have investigations and fathers aren't even talked to. And so the bias comes from people presuming that fathers don't want to be involved, and there's a lot of that. That's true. But when when you say the father doesn't want to be involved, but people need to realize the dynamic is the perception is if I'm a father, I got no shot in family court. And so they don't even engage because it's easier to not engage than it is to spend, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, maybe even $10,000 and get the same result that you might feel, well, I might as well not engage. I can not go to court with my baby mama, be a good baby daddy, basically have an agreement outside of court and be subject to her whim. And as long as her whim is kind of reasonable, I'm not going to court and find it out because I might go to court and get worse.
How much do you attribute the bias to the disproportionate number of women who are serving as judges, if any.
You gonna try to get me in trouble? Aren't you?
I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I'm just trying to talk candidly.
Ain't that what he's trying to do? Ain't that what he's trying to do?
No.
That's what
I
he's trying to do.
No.
That's what he's
At
trying
the
to do.
end
You
of
trying
the
to get
day,
me to say something
at
stupid
the end of the
right
day,
here on there
no.
in front of everybody. And have everybody call in my office tomorrow talking about, I heard what you said.
I heard what you said.
Ooh,
I
you
heard
think you're going
what
to get a
said.
good ruling in front of me tonight, tomorrow? Don't
Yeah.
work it. Mm-mm.
Listen, but
Don't go there.
some men out there believe that there is a relationship to the disproportionate alleged treatment, bad treatment of men in courts like family court and the criminal courts when a woman files a criminal complaint against them. That there is a correlation between the fact that 90% of the judicial bench are comprised of women. And do you have an opinion on that?
It's not 90%. It's 2 out. It's 80%.
Okay. What is it? It's not 90, it's 89%?
No,
Is that what you're saying?
It's 2 out of 10 are still men. So.
No.
Okay, so anyway,
No.
you're talking about the
There's
entire
one man.
generation.
Wait, hold on. No.
Let me
There's
just-
one
let me
man
just-
in district court here in Jefferson County. There are very few in the court. There are none from the Court of Appeals from our jurisdiction and the Supreme Court. They're all women, right? There are 2 men in family court and 3 men in circuit court.
So 6 out of...
Now I know I'm not telling the number, but you got 13, 3 out of 13. You have 1 out of 17 in district court and 2 out of 10 in family court.
so it's less than 10%.
Yeah. So that's why I was asking the question in terms of, some men have argued that the disproportionate treatment and mistreatment of men in family court and in sometimes the criminal court, that there's a correlation to the fact that, 80, 85, 90% of the bench, the judicial participants are females.
Right.
And I know you disagree with that.
I know. It's not that I disagree. It's just, I know that if I were to take a poll of my clientele, all the men would agree with that. Okay? All the men would agree that, yes, there is a bias. Okay? And when you look at the makeup of the benches, you're correct. That is the majority women. All I can say is I wouldn't go on a campaign saying that women shouldn't be judges. I mean, men got to get out and vote.
And Paul, we're not saying that at all. I think what I was just asking a hypothetical because those are some of the comments that I've heard. If I've heard guys one say that if I get a woman judge, then I don't have a shot, against her, referring to his partner. So, but
I just know the sentiment from the male clients that I have, the overall sentiment, and it may not be true in every case, but they still feel like, in general, they don't have a shot in family court.
They don't have a shot in family court.
So you can tell them about all the rights, and they factor that in to whether or not they want to go to court. So
whether or not they want to spend a lot of money to
the
fight
Huffington
for it.
Post did an article, and I don't know how they got their statistics, but they took Census Bureau statistics, and they determined that it's the men's fault that they don't get fair treatment because they don't do enough to try to get the fair treatment.
Right.
But it's a circular argument because men feel like, I'm not going to go to court because I already know I'm going to get screwed.
Right. I mean, they feel like it's only appropriate to be disengaged. So let me
Right. Exactly. Say that again. That's what they feel.
Yeah. Let me ask this question, or actually, let's go to some comments. Let's talk about some comments, Paul. Because we've got some comments. We can start at the very top with your friend Deshaun Price. He says, in the state of Kentucky, when it comes to domestic violence, someone has to go, especially if you're not on the deed and it is on the discretion of the officer what they intend to do. Now that is interesting because we had talked about it doesn't matter if you're not on the deed.
Doesn't matter if you're on the deed, right?
That's a discussion for a whole nother day, but we're going to do it tonight, right? Because so many men in the system get dispossessed
Of their homes. For
domestic violence. And in Kentucky, it's for 10 days.
And it could be longer. Let's suppose it's a criminal case and there's issued a no contact order. and it's your house. You own it. You have the deed. Somebody moved in with you to live with you, but you own the house, or your family owns the house. The person living with you that you went through the DV with has no possessory interest in the house. You might not get that house back for months or longer before the outcome of that case.
Yeah, I mean, but how unfair is
It's
that?
incredibly unfair.
How unfair is that?
And the flip side is people would say, well, the person's living there and we don't want to, put a chilling effect on people taking out criminal charges against people who are abusing him, and it's the control. But at the end of the day, I don't like to see people dispossess of their property, even if there was domestic violence. I just don't. You're not going to get me to ever agree to that.
No. Okay, but this is an interesting comment. He says most female judges bring their emotional experiences from past relationships in the court system instead of their personal professional intelligence.
I don't know that to be true.
You don't know that to be true?
I think every judge is going to bring that applies for every judge.
502-410-5710 if you want to call in, 502-410-5710, and you can join the conversation.
But at the end of the day, every judge is going to bring their bias in. And
every judge has
you have to be
his
careful
or
who you
her,
elect,
her baggage. So, when you think about this, I'm still on this thought that you can own a home for 20 years. And I'm just going to use me as an example.
Got a case this week.
I own my home for 23 years. It's paid off. I let a young lady move in. We have a disagreement. And because I'm a nice guy, she goes downtown and she lies. And now I'm out of my home. I'm away from my personal possessions.
But let's talk about whether it doesn't matter whether it's true or not.
I'm away from my deodorant. I'm away from all of that stuff.
But to me, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Like, even if there was domestic violence, you still have taken someone out of their house,
right,
and let the person who's the victim, she's the victim, great. But that's not your house.
Right.
I don't like that.
Right. I mean, it seems so unfair that that at the stroke of a pen, and understand it's not really a pen, it's a stamp, right, Paul? To get an EPO, to get 10 days taken away from, taking you out of your residence. I mean, it's a stamp. And you come down and you file an EPO and boom, they stamp it. And when it is served, you are on notice that you cannot go back
to
there
the residence. And the person at the residence only has to sign something saying that's where they live.
Right.
They don't have to prove that they own it. They don't have to prove any of that. And so they can dispossess you of your house.
So unfair. So unfair.
I can't.
We're going to continue to talk about this topic. Our phone number here tonight is 502-410-5710 if you want to call in and join the conversation. I'm Carl Price, this Conscious Fever. Paul Mullins is co-hosting and guesting tonight and all of that. And we're talking about a hot topic. We'll be right back.
It's the best of the best. It's the one and only.
You can't handle the truth.
You are listening to Conscious Fever, hosted by Carl Price.
Now, I'm going to tell you, you always do that to me. Anyway, welcome back to Conscious Fever here on Ice Entertainment Television and Conscious Fever Radio. I'm Carl Price, your host. We're going to talk about some comments here. Let's take us to the comment board again. Our producer here. And let's just go through some of these. Tiffany Perriman, what is your opinion? Interesting. I don't know who Tiffany Perriman is.
What is your
Stacy, okay, so he's calling names of women now. Have you had these types of experiences, Deshaun, with these women? The phone number here is 502-410-5710. Call in and destroy your love life if you wish. Carla
Call them
Allen.
all out.
Look, he's calling them all out.
All the women in his life.
All of them, he's calling them out. And that's not a woman. Troy Collier, that's his cousin. Okay, here's one from Casada Moore.
Yeah,
Casada Moore says, I disagree. I feel there is a bias sometimes against women, especially black women, in family court.
I guess the moral of the story is that everybody feels like it sucks against them.
Against family court. But do you agree with Miss Moore?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't agree either, Miss Moore. I don't agree. You can call us in 502-410-5710 if you want to explain yourself. But listen, I don't agree. I just believe that, today we're human, and our thought process is influenced so much by everything around us, the social media, and just everything. And I don't think judges really have the capacity to separate themselves from that. Now, that doesn't mean that every judge is not being unbiased about the gender that's in front of her, but disproportionately, I think, Paul, every man that has this perception that they've been treated unfairly, it's just not a coincidence.
No, it's no coincidence that men routinely come in my office and the best they hope for is a fair, equal schedule. And that's what they set their goal at, and it's because they're already prone to believe that that's the best they can get, short of the mother being on drugs or incarcerated or something else going on in her life. And that's no coincidence. Whereas women come in and they have an expectation, well, I want sole custody or, primary residence, and he should only see the child every other weekend because he works all the time. Because they come up with many, many reasons,
and that's
which
BS.
which would normally be valid under the old system, but
I think that's BS.
They come in with a. I mean, just from my experience, they come in with a different expectation and that expectation doesn't come out of the blue. It's because that's historically what has been allowed. Think about how it was in 1980.
Go ahead.
Today's different from 1980. In 1980, we would say you could spend thousands of dollars, $10,000, but a judge will simply say, which when I first started practicing, I was in front of a judge and she said, well, children need to be with their moms. You're not going to get custody. And she gave my guy basically an every other weekend schedule.
Yeah, and so that's really the crux of the problem. I mean, sometimes you have a man who is fully qualified and is the better parent all around, and he still has to climb uphill. Now, I would tell you, I had a case back in the 90s. I did get my client custody of his son, but that was because we had some really, really damning pictures of where the son was physically abused.
That's what you got to have. But that's the problem. Why do you have to have the extra? And again, so we need to tell people that
because the judges play it safe. I know we all have judges who are friends, and we have judges who are friends in family court. And the bottom line is that judges play it safe. Right? They play it safe. They say, okay, I'm not going to give it to the man because what if he goes out with his boys and leaves the kids alone and something happened to him? Somebody's going to look me up and say, oh, well, that judge gave it to him. And so you bring in all these pictures and it's just like, oh, no question. I can give it to you now because I can justify now by seeing these pictures the abuse that she perpetrated on this child. But why does it take something like that when the law says 50-50, right?
Well, that's what it says now. I'm telling you right now, it's different than it was 5 years ago. So I'm acknowledging that. And that's because a law had to be put in place to grant equal, consideration. And I'm just saying men still feel like they don't have rights because historically you could have spent $50,000 to get custody of your son and you weren't going to get it. And that's what people knew. And we're just talking about custody right now, but there's other areas. I mean, there is sufficient evidence that women get lighter sentences in criminal court.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get charged many times on the street because they're females. They don't even make it to court. A lot of things happen, and I'm not saying I think women should be mistreated. I'm saying that this is just a fact that men are routinely aware of when they come to me, that they have faced these biases.
Right, and let's not be quiet about the fact that, some men inherently are just completely not fit to have custody of their children.
True,
right?
but we're not counting those cases. We're talking about cases where things are equal, and historically, when things were equal, you still didn't win.
Okay, so listen, Paul. So Quora placed on this website, we can go to image one, placed on this website these types of questions. What are the best examples of unfairness against men in the family courts? And there is a comment here by Harry Johnstone. I don't know if you still have that over there with you. But he says, because the court system is a joke.
Yes.
It's an embarrassment, and it should be shut down. Imagine as a married man coming home to find your wife having sex with the neighbor. If that wasn't bad enough, she then is granted full custody where you must pay this piece of SH slogan T. I mean, image T. Cheater 1/3 of your monthly earnings as quote unquote child support, and give her half of what she decided to sign your kid up for. That sounds familiar, doesn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I mean,
if that wasn't okay. The quality of the male's life is usually drastically reduced because who cares about the dad as long as the mother and child get to keep their quote standard way of living, close quote. It's laughable and pathetic, he says.
right. So he's obviously feeling it. Now, laws have been changed in the last 3 to 5 years, which now men, it's not just men, but there's a presumption that parents should have equal custody. And now, finally, the child support system is caught up to that. And now you get credit for your visitation. So if you visit in Kentucky, if you visit a child half the time, you would pay a lot less child support, if any. If you visit the child every other weekend or about 70 or 80 days a year, you'll still get something off of your child support, which I think is a good thing because it encourages people to be a part of their child's lives. Whether they're doing it for the money or not, the child don't care.
You see, the problem that I have with child...
I need the moms to understand that when they come to court and say, he's just doing this to not pay child support, if he's still a good father at the end of the day, it don't matter. It's still good for the child.
I just think that when you factor child support in, there's a lot of bias there as well because there are some judges who are suspect of men who say, listen, I'm the better parent, I want custody of the child. And then the judge looks at the child support order and say, why should I switch custody? Oh, maybe he doesn't want to pay this $1,000 a week.
And I always argue two things. I've been arguing this since before the law changed, which as soon as someone says to me that dad does not want, he only wants custody so that he gets child support, I flip it around, and I've done this for many, many years, and I say, well, the mom doesn't want him to have the child so she can keep getting child support. See how you flip that around? Right. It's the same. So get rid of that argument because at the end of the day, probably if you can't point to any other reason, that child spending more time with his father is probably going to be good for him. Right.
And so we're going to talk about the best advice for men, how men can avoid these situations we're talking about. But I want to go back to the image board and look at what Mike Compton says. Mike Compton says the best example that I can think of right off the top of my head, there are men that are forced to pay child support to children that are not theirs genetically. Even when proven with lab-certified evidence that the child is not theirs, the court still forces the man to pay child support. So a man who was foolish enough to trust his spouse's word about the percentage, about the parentage of her children, has to pay her child support until the child becomes 18 years of age.
Now, I don't know how.
Just so the state doesn't have to pick up the financial burden.
So I don't know how old that is, but
that.
I've had cases like that, Carl, and you have to fight those. I had one a long time ago with a judge who's been off the bench for a while. Like this is when I first started practicing. And I'm gonna say this again. When I first started practicing, it was this bad. It's not that bad today because laws have changed and judges have changed. But I had a case where a lady literally wore a shirt to court that said, "Mama's baby, daddy's maybe." And he was he was challenging that he was the father. And this is the one case that I remember where a judge actually denied him a paternity test despite her saying he wasn't the daddy. And the judge's only reason was, well, you've been the daddy, so too bad. And that was a long time ago. I would get past that today. But I was a new lawyer, and in that case, I always remember some of these cases when you start practicing. You know, when you first start practicing law and you're getting your feet wet, you don't know as much stuff as we do 25 years in the game. Right,
but Paul, let's pause there a second and say, because you make it sound like that's the norm.
I mean, even if it's not the norm, it happened. It's bad.
Hold on, Paul.
That's bad.
But make the people that are listening understand why a judge would go that far, because we think it's ridiculous, right? But really there are some laws to support that, right? If a man... No, listen to me, Paul. Just hear me out. Because you're in family court now. I'm not. I know you always say, man, you haven't practiced in family court in 20 years. Things have changed. But let me just say this. There is law out there in Kentucky that says that if the child only knew you as the father and you have assumed that role for a significant period of time, now when you want to come back and get out of that role, sometimes the judges don't let you out. So when this, hold on.
I don't care.
I understand it's wrong, but I was just making a point, Paul. I'm not arguing with you. The point I was making was that you say that, just like this guy said. You know, what was his name? Mike Compton said. And what I'm getting at is that, you know, you hear Mike Compton say that, even though the test says that I'm not the father, then I still have to pay child support. But there is actually case law that supports why that happens. You may not agree with it, but we've seen it happen many times before where men have assumed the role. And all I'm saying to the men out there is that when you assume the role, when everything is okay for the first 6 or 7 or 8 years of this child's life, and you're the softball coach and all of that, and you decide that, okay, the relationship is ended. I know that's not my child. I'm out of here. Some judges won't let you out, and tell them why, Paul.
Well, I can tell you why, because they're just making bad rulings. Now we can agree or disagree, but
I know there's some law on that, Paul.
You can call it the law, but even if you read it, it's still ridiculous ruling.
Paul, I agree that it's ridiculous ruling, but I'm just saying that I just said to you.
You don't like what I said?
No, it's not that I don't like what you said. I don't like what you're giving your opinion. I'm just asking you to confirm that is the law. Whether you agree with it or not.
I'm not going to confirm that. I'm telling you that's a ridiculous ruling, because what they're saying is, if I'm nice to somebody,
the same thing.
I'm just saying it's a ridiculous ruling. If I'm nice to
it is.
If I'm nice,
but it's the law.
It is not the law.
It is the law.
Well, okay.
I'll show you a case. What happens, people is that when I prove Paul right, then Paul generally would say, okay, yeah, you're right.
No, I'm not going to tell you right, because you're going to show.
He's like the newspaper that never reprint the lie on the front page where the lie started. But okay.
You're going to make me pull the family court argument again and say you ain't been in family court.
Okay, you can say that. I'm glad not to be in family court.
I'm not going to say that. But I'm just telling you that.
What they say today, them mofos are crazy. Go ahead.
Yes, that's the type of stuff that went on. That's the type of stuff that went on when I first started practicing. Those are ridiculous rulings. What you're telling people is that if I play the role of father, which turns out to be stepfather, then now I'm on the hook. No, I ain't on the hook. The person who lied to me and made me think I was father, they're on the hook. They're the ones who would have to answer the question of why I'm not daddy. Not me. You can lie to me and tell me I'm daddy. I'm happy. I like children. If the child is cute, and I like the mom good enough, I'll be his daddy. You tell me.
Child has to be cute.
No, I'm kidding about that.
Are you discriminating against ugly babies?
You know what I'm saying? I play the role of dad because I might not feel like I have any reason to question that. But the only people who really know whether there can be a second daddy is the mama. Unless she tells the dad, hey, you know what? I played around on you. You might want to get a test. They don't never come out.
What about women who conceal that for so long? You know, the child turns 18, 19, 20 years old.
I got plenty. I got another case. I had a guy come in my office maybe 10, 15 years ago, said that he got into an argument with his ex-wife, and she told him that his 21-year-old daughter wasn't his.
It's always in an argument.
Yes. And then told the daughter, Dad ain't your daddy. Your stepdaddy is your real daddy. She done had an affair with the man that she married after him, made him do all the child support shit, kept him away from all that. Only to tell, I know.
That's okay.
Only to tell him when the child's 21, this ain't your baby. Now, if you knew that, now you knew that then. That's fraud. Don't reward people for fraud.
Right. But all I'm saying, Paul, is that, and we can talk about it at another time. We can talk about it over lunch or something. But there is case law out there that says the man can't pull out.
I'm telling you.
I don't mean literally pulling out, because if he pulled out, he wouldn't have been in this situation.
I'm telling you that would be defeated.
Listen, Paul. I'm just saying that. Okay, good.
I couldn't handle it back then because I was too young, but I can handle that.
Yeah, but there is law out there. Let's look at this
stupid law. Law needs to be overturned. If you got a case like that recently,
Robert Stone, why are family courts so hostile to men despite the claims of feminism about equality? The courts consider women as the weaker sex. You can't have it both ways. Personally, I consider situations of women with children who have been abandoned indeed to be at a serious disadvantage. Those women should be supported. However, there are many women of flawed character. who are the cause of a broken family, and too many times their children are treated badly by the psycho or criminal mother. The court, going by the assumed paradigm, then treats the male as the problem. And that automatic bias is wrong and needs to be fixed. I had a loving father, but a neurotic mother. She kicked him out, treated us two kids rather badly in important ways, and there was no sign of interest from the court. So my personal experience is that men can get screwed by the system. You agree or disagree, Paul?
I've seen it. I mean, I won a custody case for a guy years ago. These are old cases under the old rules, where he had to prove. He would always say the mom was not treating the kids right, and nobody would believe him until finally he had to bring in the proof, and he was just never believed for 5 or 10 years until we finally got the proof when the kids were like 13. And then he got custody and he kept them until they were adults. But it takes a lot to overcome the burden of, the mom shouldn't have the child. It just takes a lot. It takes a lot. And it doesn't take very much to overcome the burden of the dad shouldn't see him. I mean, it's an innate bias. But if you walk in and you say dad's abusive, judges are on alarm. Like, do they need the extra proof? Maybe, but they're on alarm.
Here's a good one for you, Paul. If you look at the image here, it says, our courts have been corrupted by money-grabbing lawyers.
Wow.
They want to see a couple split, for that means more money for them. Feminists who have no interest in seeing men getting treated fairly or in a loving relationship with a woman. Blue pillars, white knights, and Magenas who look at themselves as servants of justice, slavishly working for feminists who have absolutely no interest in them.
I'm just going to disregard that comment now.
Why is that?
He's obviously angry.
He is. Ron Hunter says that the problem with examples is that they are simply anecdotal evidence. Better to look at the hard census data to see what really happens in family court. And he gives a link here, someone who has graphed the data from the Census Bureau. It is very hard to deny bias in the system when one gender wins 80% of the time. Still, who says that life is fair?
80%. So women win custody cases 80% of the time. That would seem like bias.
You said that would seem like bias?
Yeah, but of course the Huffington Post article, the flip side, if anybody wants to hear the counter argument, is that men don't ask for custody enough. And the Huffington Post article claims that 91% of the men award the women custody without fighting it out in court. And I guess the case could be made that they don't fight it out in court because they figure they're automatically going to lose in family court. But Huffington Post says they're just not interested in being custodial parents. So I don't know what the truth is. I just know that my anecdotal experience is guys come in and before they even ask for custody, they feel defeated already.
Here's what Nancy Schmeck says. She says, I was in line waiting to check. With the court clerk, and the two attorneys in line ahead of me began discussing the results of court-ordered paternity testing. The attorney representing the father of 5 children born during the marriage said the testing showed the husband was not the father of any of the 5 children. Wow. The attorney for the mother, who was incarcerated, I have no idea what for, said that the mother had thought he might be the father of at least one of the 5 children. She said, I felt like I was experiencing a real-life Jerry Springer moment. It was surreal to me.
I just think that
kind of what we experience in family court.
So I remember I had a case where a lot of times guys are, this is the sad truth. A lot of times guys are afraid to ask for a blood test or a DNA test. They're afraid. They're afraid because, number one, you call in the question of paternity and it's a no-win situation. If you're right, you know what I'm saying, you're not the child's father even though you thought you were and you find out your partner's been cheating. If you're wrong, now that person's mad at you because you've accused her of cheating. It's a no. They're completely afraid, Carl, to ask for DNA testing. And I personally
do you think men are afraid? Even the men who really believe that there's a high likelihood that they're not?
The vast majority of people that come into my office who are asking for custody of their children are afraid to ask for a DNA test.
Well, but that makes sense though, Paul. You know why? Because because now your life is contradictory, right? Now this court system for you is going to be contradictory. You're saying, I want custody of this child, but I'm not sure if it's mine.
Right. And so what I'm saying to you is that's not right either. In Ohio, I had a client who was getting a divorce in Kentucky, but the wife lived in Ohio. And in Ohio, he told me that when she asked for child support, as a matter of requirement, if you ask for child support, there must be a DNA test. So it's not an issue of do you want one or not.
I think that's a good thing.
There must. I agree with it.
I think that's a good thing. That there must be one. You can't do it. But because it's really a two-way street with the men and the women with this, because there are men living with children, just like you said, because the child is cute. I want that child to be mine. And then when things fall apart 15 years later, he wants to bolt.
When you say he wants to bolt, you got to realize that if you tell me that a woman said to me, this might not be your daddy, and you didn't do anything, even with that, I still think he should get a DNA test. But
I think he should too.
Right, but he should get one then. And even if he asks for one for later, he should get one later. I believe that. But that's where you get into that case law of, well, you didn't act on, you sat on your right.
Right, but do you leave the child?
It's not.
Do you leave the child out?
You're saying leave the child out.
No. Do you leave the child out to dry?
You're saying leave the child out to dry. We are talking about things that go beyond the child's emotional state. If I have 3 children and someone says I have a 4th, and I find out that 4th child is not mine, you are now affecting 3 other adults' possible inheritance, possible family line, possible family lineage. So no, you shouldn't just focus on how this one particular child feels. That's not fair.
Yeah, but see,
it's not the child's fault that he.
No, and it's not the child's fault that the child is in the middle of an emotional battle.
These are real life
now
situations.
You have a situation. They are real life situations, but now you have a situation where here you have this child, and this child has been has become emotionally attached to this man.
Or bastardized, right?
Well, right. So that's always, the big elephant in the room. But what I'm saying to you, Paul, is that I just want to get back on this because I think I heard you say something that I don't think you really believe.
Yeah, I do.
Are you saying the hell with the child? So you have let me finish. You told me. Yeah,
you can phrase this the hell with the child.
No, I'm not going to phrase it that way. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. So you have a situation where at 3 years old, the man comes into the child's life. She's only know him to be daddy. And initially mom said that he was the daddy. Later, when she's 10 years old, they find out, that's not the case. The young lady gets to the vulnerable year, right, which is 12 and 13. As the man, do you just say, oh, well, listen, I found out a long time ago I'm not your daddy. You have a nice life.